Hey, how's it going? Seth here from REtipster.com. In this video, I want to show you a relatively new software I discovered not long ago called the Land Portal. And if you're a land investor, this is something you're probably going to want to know about. What they've essentially done is they've taken the best parts of a few different software services, combined them together, and then they lowered the price. It's got filters that literally are not available anywhere else, and they're highly advantageous for land investors. And also, just so you know, before we get much further, REtipster does have an affiliate link to the Land Portal. You can get to that through retipster.com/Land Portal. And if you do, I seriously appreciate your willingness to support the REtipster community and to treat yourself to an awesome piece of software. I'll show you what I mean. Let's go up here to the left sidebar where it says filtered search. And right up here at the top, you'll see where it says vacant lots. If we check this, so what it's doing here is it is using AI satellite imagery to determine whether or not the property has any structures on it. So typically what is done here is we can go down here and filter it based on the total amount of square footage of buildings on the property. And this can certainly work too, but the problem is some counties have terrible data or non-existent data when it comes to filtering specifically by the total square footage. So if you were to go to one of those counties and not know that and put in, say, only properties with 0 to 0 square feet or something like that, like say, for example, if you're looking specifically for vacant land, what it would do there in some cases is just give you all the properties regardless of the square feet, because it doesn't have the square feet. So it's just going to assume everything is 0. And you wouldn't really know that until you've already paid for the list and you're looking at it and you realize, oh, this is all wrong. So what this can do here is it forgets about that whole square footage thing. It's just looking at the satellite map image. The only drawback I can think of this is that, first of all, it's not perfect. So it may misunderstand things in some cases. Say if there's a property with a lot of tree coverage and the trees cover the house and you just can't see it, then you wouldn't see the house and think that it's vacant. Or say if the satellite imagery it's using is a couple years old and maybe something was built there, but the satellite image is still showing nothing there, it's going to think there's nothing there. So that's just a couple things to be aware of, but it's just an alternative way to go about doing this. And it's particularly useful in the counties where you know this total square footage filter is garbage. So it's a nice thing to have, and you could use one or the other or both. This other thing here where it says vacant structures. So this is something used a lot more by house wholesalers, and this is essentially properties where there is a structure on it, but the U.S. Postal Service is not able to deliver mail there because nobody's living there or receiving mail there. So if you want just those properties, according to the USPS database, it'll filter them just by that. And then residential properties, this just means the residential use code. So only properties that are zoned residential. Or you can select none of these if you want. And when you go down here, a lot of this filtering criteria looks very similar to other data services if you're familiar with those. If you're not familiar with those, I'll just quick show you how that works. So we can start by picking a state and then picking a county. And once we have that, we can say, okay, I only want the properties that are zoned this way, or I only want properties on here that are between, 40 and 100 acres, or I only want the properties where the owner lives out of state or where the owner lives out of the county. The reason that's significant is because a lot of times people who own land in a different state or county from where they live, it's one of those situations where it's out of sight, out of mind. It's just not something they are quite as emotionally invested in. But you can go through these different filtering options and filter it that way. And say if you didn't want to filter it just by the county, but you wanted to drill down to one city or a few cities within that county, you can do that as well. And or one zip code or a few zip codes within that county. You can get pretty specific about it, which is awesome. I know a lot of times people do their pricing or searches based on certain zip codes, not by the entire county. And something even more significant, this is where we're getting into the stuff that land investors are really going to care a lot about. And this is part of why the Land Portal is kind of a big deal, because if you're a land investor, you're probably very familiar with this problem that, all the data services and software out there weren't really made for us. They were made for other audiences and much larger segments of the market that needed it for different, broader things. Whereas land investors, there's not that many of us out there who are trying to flip land or do specifically what we're trying to do. So we basically have to work within the confines of these softwares that weren't made for us. But the Land Portal is different. This was made by land investors for land investors. So there's some things in here that are made specifically for us, things that a lot of other parties probably wouldn't even care that much about, but we do. So it's kind of a nice luxury to finally have something like this. And one of those things is this landlocked filter. So what you can do is say, I only want to see the properties in this county on this list that are landlocked, meaning they don't have road access. And if you're not already aware, there's a lot of parcels out there in the country that for whatever reason were subdivided in such a way that there's no road access to them. So legally speaking, they're kind of useless because you can't legally access them. And again, what this is doing is it's looking at the satellite imagery to try to determine if there is road access to this property or not. And it's basically just looking at streets that are out there in the national database to say, hey, is there a street running here or not? So one thing to note about this, if you've got a property that appears to be landlocked because there's no public street going by it, but there is a legal easement going to it, so you can legally get to it, but that road isn't visible from the satellite map, this is not going to see that because it can't see the road. Or you could say, no, don't include any properties that are landlocked. So if this thinks it's landlocked, don't show it to me. Don't put it on my list. And that right there is an amazing filter. Some people are intentionally trying to avoid landlocked properties, and some people are intentionally trying to go after only landlocked properties because they want to force an easement and basically buy a property for really cheap and then make it worth a lot more after they add that easement and put a road in. So whatever your strategy is, if that matters to you one way or another, you can filter it that way now. And that's something you can't really do on most other data services that I know of. And along those same lines, there's also this road frontage filter. This is another very unique filter. I'm not aware of any other service that offers this, where you can filter properties based on how many feet of road frontage there are running in front of it. For example, this could be significant if you're looking for larger properties that you can subdivide. And when you're trying to do that, it's ideal if you can find a property that already has a lot of road frontage, because you can subdivide the property in such a way that the new child parcels all have their own little bit of road frontage, so that you don't have to cut in a new road with all that extra expense in there. So it helps to get a property that already has a lot of road frontage on it. And this will just allow you to say, hey, don't even show me the property unless it has 1,000 feet of road frontage or whatever you want the number to be. And also this does include corners. So say if you have a parcel on a corner and there's two different roads, it'll factor in the road frontage from both of those roads on there. So we could say, hey, only show me the properties with 1,000 to 5,000 feet of frontage on there. And when you do that, you'll notice that this landlocked filter, that just kind of shut off, because if there's road frontage, then obviously it's not landlocked. And there's also this FEMA coverage thing where you can say, I don't want there to be any more than 10% of my property covered with a flood zone, or only show me the properties that have no flood zone on them, that kind of thing. It's not important to everybody, but if it's important to you, you have the ability to filter based on that now. And I believe they're also in the process of adding a filter for wetlands as well, which is probably going to work the same way. It's not currently available at the time of this recording, but when you watch it, it probably will be available. So that's something to be aware of. Let's just go ahead and apply these filters and see how many properties we get on this list. We've got 0. And just so you know, this is actually a very common thing with these data services. If you put too many filters on there, then you can basically filter out everything. So you have no properties on your list. The way to fix this is to just start clearing out some of these filters until it opens up a bit. So I'm going to get rid of these zip code things I put in there in these cities. We'll just filter it by the whole county. Let's apply this again and see how many we get. Okay, so we've got 518. Let's go check out this list view. Now it's going to zoom in and it's going to show us on the map where all these properties are. And let's see here. Let's zoom in a little bit and we can start to see them right there. It outlines them for us and it shows us the owner name on each one. And if you're at all familiar with Land ID, this will probably look kind of familiar because it sort of works a similar way where it shows you parcel lines with the owner names on them. Now, another thing while we're here that I want to show you is there's these mapping filters, which can be very, very useful. This is also kind of similar to how Land ID works, if you're at all familiar with that, where you can have certain layers added or removed from the map. So let's say I don't want to see these owner names anymore. Just show me the parcel lines and that's it. Once we do that, now those names are gone. Or some of the more useful ones here is like contour lines, for example. So understanding the topography is very important for land investors, especially if you or anybody in the future is planning to build on that property, because it has big implications for if you can build anything and how much engineering is going to be required to build something on there. Just looking at it from this angle here, this shows you the different elevations. And this may be kind of hard to make sense of if you're not that familiar with these maps. And if you want to have it just look a little bit more meaningful, you can click this 3D button down here, and it allows you to tilt the Earth, kind of like how it works on Google Earth. And now you can zoom in and just get a much clearer picture for like, oh, okay, there's the hill. I understand now what that means. And Michigan is a pretty flat place, so there's not a ton of crazy stuff going on here. But if you were to do this, in Colorado or places with some more mountains throughout them, you'll see a lot more interesting stuff here. And with all this stuff and all these layers I'm showing you, it's worth noting that these things are not pinpoint accurate. If you wanted to be 110% sure about all the different elevations on your property, you'd have to order a topographical survey, which costs thousands of dollars. But just as a first pass, this is very useful just to get a vague idea of what's going on. And if we go back here to these filters, let's turn the contour lines off, and instead let's turn on the soil type. This is also very interesting. This data comes from the USDA. Originally, it was put out there for agricultural purposes, but it's also useful for land investors in understanding a vague idea, not exact, but a vague idea of what soil types are in this area. And the reason that might be important is because certain soil types don't have much load-bearing capacity, like if you try to put a building on there, it might cave in, and that's a problem. Or certain soil types like clay, for example, don't drain very well, which means you might not be able to put a septic system in there, which then means you can't build a house or a dwelling there, which then means the value of the property goes way down. And again, to be absolutely sure of the soil types on the property, you'd have to order a geotechnical investigation, which also costs thousands of dollars. But again, as a first pass, if you want to just get a vague idea, this will tell you what these different soil types are in the area. So like I can click on this one right here, and it tells me this is Kalkaska sand, 6 to 18% slopes. I don't even know what this means, but it's not that hard to copy and paste this into something like ChatGPT and just ask it, hey, I'm trying to build a house on this property and I see this is the soil type. Can you tell me if there's anything I should be concerned about? Does this have any implications for what I may or may not be able to build there? And it'll spit out some answers for you and you can make more sense of it. Again, this is something that's on Land ID as well, but it's just baked right into this. There's also water features. So this can be really helpful at understanding where all of the lakes and the streams and the creeks and the ponds are, because sometimes you may not be able to see it very clearly just looking at a satellite map. I know I've had this before where, like, depending on the time of year when the satellite picture was taken, maybe there's trees covering the creek and I can't really see them that well. And I'd never know it until after I bought that thing. And now I realize I can't build anything there because there's a creek running through it. This will just make it really clear for you where those known water features are. And also here, wetlands, a similar thing where if there's wetlands that it thinks may exist, this will show you that. If you wanted to be 100% sure about the wetland situation, you'd have to order a wetland delineation. But again, this is just a first pass to see what might be going on there. And then the FEMA floodplain as well. So if there are flood zones running throughout your property, this would show you where that stuff is. For some reason, in this particular county, it's not showing any flood zones where I know there probably should be, like around this natural lake right here. So that may be just a county specific issue, but that's just another thing to be aware of. If you ever see any abnormalities like that, sometimes that happens. This software isn't always perfect. But again, just having the ability to quickly turn this stuff on and off, super helpful. Now, another thing while we're here, let's say we want to find out who owns some of these properties here. So let's say we click on this one and it shows us the owner names over here. I'm going to blur some of this stuff out just for their privacy. But something you can do here, in addition to seeing the owner names and their mailing address, say if you wanted to send them a letter or something like that, and some other just basic information on the property, you can also go up here and skip trace this person right here, right now, and get their phone numbers and email addresses. And it costs 50 cents to do this one at a time. And if you're really just doing a couple of these things, that's a nominal amount of money. So the reason where this might be most helpful is, say you just bought this property, or maybe you're about to buy this property. You also want to buy some of these neighboring properties to maybe add on to this property. And you're curious if these people are interested in selling too. Or maybe you own this thing and you want to sell it to one of the neighboring owners. One way you could do this is by sending out neighbor letters to these people. And that's fine, but it takes a while for the letters to get there. And it's also a much less direct form of communication. And you also don't even really know if your letters will ever get to them. They might throw the letter away. But with their phone number, you can call them and have a much faster, more direct conversation and know that you got through to them. And it's frankly a more effective way to communicate, assuming you know how to handle yourself on the phone. So going back over here to this list view again, one thing we can do right here, right now is export the list. But before we do that, I want to show you one thing you can do is to save this list, and you can either add it to an existing list you've got, or you can create a new list. The reason this might be useful is, say if you're not just trying to do one county at a time, you're working on like 3 counties at a time in one corner of the state. You can create a list and add all those different lists into this save list. So I'm going to call this Northwestern Michigan and save it there. And then we can go to that save list and we see it all right here. And once we've got whatever counties or areas all piled into this one saved list, we can then export it this way or bulk skip trace it this way. So I'm going to start here by exporting this list, and there's a few different options to do this. So we could have this list emailed to us. There's not really a need to do that because you can access your list from the land portal at any time. So I'm not going to mess with that. You can remove duplicates if you want. I know there's different thoughts out there and whether or not that's a smart thing to do or not, depending on whether you're trying to go after portfolio owners or just, whatever you're trying to do. But if you want to remove duplicates, you can. Say if somebody owns 20 properties and you don't want to send them 20 letters. And I'll tell you, if you click this button here, what it's going to do, it's only going to give you one. And the one that's going to show you is the one with the most acreage. And then you can also remove data with empty mailing addresses. And I'll say this just depends on what kind of marketing you're planning to send out. So if you know you're going to send direct mail and that's all you're ever going to send to these people, then you might as well remove any records where there's no mailing address because you can't send mail to them, right? But what if you're going to cold call them or send them a text or a ringless voicemail or an email? Well, in that case, you wouldn't necessarily want to remove them because you can still use the information it's going to give you to skip trace them and get the contact information you need that way. So you just got to think through, what am I trying to do with this list? What's my next step after this? In this example, I'm going to just remove the data with empty mailing addresses and then place the order. Okay, so I'll head over here to orders history. And once we're over here, let's go ahead to this one that I just generated. We're going to download this as a CSV file. It's kind of what you might expect if you're at all familiar with how these data services work. Pretty much all the information we'd ever want to see and then some. What you can do from this point is you can start organizing it or removing things or whatever you want to do. But another thing I want to show you is how you can skip trace this kind of list. So let's go up here and we're going to start new order. So if you know you're going to be sending out texts or ringless voicemails or emails or cold calling or any of that stuff, the list can either come from the land portal, like it can originate from this, or if you have a list from some other place, you could use that as well. I'll go ahead and upload it here. Actually, I've got a smaller list that I got from here that I'm going to upload just so I'm not skip tracing so much stuff at once. And there's about 160 records in this one, I think. So we'll go ahead and click next. And it's going to start by showing you these map fields where you have to tell it where the last name is in this list, where the first name is, and it can use that to then run this skip trace. So we're going to do this. Owner 1 last name. We'll say owner 1 first name, mailing address. Put that there. And if you want to put more stuff in there, you can, but that should be enough right then and there to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my digits here and run this skip trace, and we'll see what comes back. Okay, so we're placing the order, and this can take a few minutes depending on how big the list is. You might want to give yourself, 10 minutes for it to happen, but it just depends on how many people you're trying to skip trace at once. Now let's talk for just a second about pricing. So depending on when you're watching this, the pricing may change. It may go up since I've recorded this video, but I will say at the time of this recording, the pricing is pretty darn good for what you get here. I think where you actually start paying more is when you start exporting data. And depending on which pricing plan you sign up for, the per record export cost gets substantially cheaper. And the land portal also doesn't force you to sign on to a year-long commitment when you sign up for this. And if you are willing to pay by the year, then the price gets even cheaper on a per month basis when you change it to that. It's really not a bad deal at all, considering that you get a lot of the most important functionality from the data service side, but also from the mapping due diligence side, all baked into one. However, I will say if you're somebody who uses Land ID's feature where you can create and save maps and add notations on it and then share those maps with people and that kind of thing, the land portal doesn't do that. So you would still want to use Land ID for that. Or say if you really rely on the mobile app for Land ID or whatever data service you're using, the Land Portal does not currently have a mobile app either. It's something you have to use on your desktop. So it certainly has its limitations, but they're pretty actively adding to and improving this thing like with each passing week. Since I've heard about it, every week there's been some new thing that they're adding to it. So it's continually getting better. It'll probably be a lot better in the future depending on when you're watching this. REtipster does have an affiliate link for this. If you want to help support the REtipster community and treat yourself to an awesome data service, you can just go to retipster.com/land portal. All one word. And that's how you can get to our affiliate link. Thank you very much if you sign up through that. And then one last thing I want to show you here while we're waiting for that skip trace is how this Polygon tool works. So the Polygon tool is something that's available in most of these data services. It's not necessarily unique to the Land Portal, but it is still very helpful if you have like a very hyper-specific geographic area that you're trying to target. You're not targeting it by the county or the city or the zip code. Maybe you've got like 6 city blocks that you're trying to search within or something like that. You can use this Polygon tool to do that. Let's zoom into this area here and we're going to click this polygon and we can just start drawing around like this and we can make it whatever size or shape we want. We can close it off by double clicking it again. And now when we go over here and start hitting up these filtering options, it's going to apply all of those things from within this polygon that we just drew. And we can even do multiple polygons within the same kind of area. So I could do another one now. Let's say we want to do this. So now it's going to apply all that filtering criteria within these 2 polygons. And we can even take this thing and like move it around if we want to. I don't know if the other data services can do that or not, but I wasn't aware of that if they could. So I thought that was pretty cool. I know in the past I've used this when I'm trying to find properties that are within a certain distance from a major highway for one reason or another. Like say if I'm looking for billboard locations or a place where we can do industrial storage and it just makes sense to be closer to a highway, you can draw this kind of polygon so it outlines the highway. And I will say, if you try to go into multiple counties with this, you might run into some issues. I did that and found that the 3 different counties I was trying to do this within, they had different data filtering standards or something, and it just couldn't compute. So if you do this, you might want to try to keep it all within the same county to the extent possible. But let's go back over here to skip tracing, and we'll see if that's done, and it looks like it is. Let's go ahead and download this thing. So this is our list here. And we're looking for those phone numbers. I'm probably going to blur some of this stuff out just for the sake of these people's privacy. Okay, here we go. So we've got DNC, do not call list, and litigator filters. And we've got phone 1 for this person. And then it says whether it's residential or mobile number. And then phone 2. Phone 3 in some cases, phone 4 in some cases. And usually when you're doing this kind of thing, phone 1 is going to be your best bet. That's probably most likely the most accurate one to use. And then email addresses as well. We got several email addresses here. We can also see relative names and phone numbers and the ages of the relatives and stuff like that. So lots of information to work from. This is very similar to what you get from most bulk skip tracing services, at least the good ones. Skip tracing, easy peasy. It's not hard to do at all. And it took less than 10 minutes to get those. I mean, if I was starting over from scratch today, I might consider just using this instead of anything else because it's all right here, you know. I probably would still use Land ID for certain things, like when I want to share maps. I know it's really useful for that. Data tree, say if I was trying to do like title search stuff, I know that's something it's useful for that isn't necessarily available here. And what I love about it is the price. It's not bad at all. It's cheaper than most data services I know of, like by a lot. So yeah, again, if you want to check it out, retipster.com/land portal. I hope you find it useful and helpful. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.